She was sitting on the floor of Bay 11 when I found her, back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, watching the door the way small things watch things that might still come through it. Ashen skin, silver eyes too wide for her face, ears tapering to fine points above a tangle of pale hair. No intake band on her wrist. No belongings. No adult anywhere near her. I was 40 minutes into my closing sweep of the medical annex at Verk's Landing, and I had seen a lot of things in 6 years working that station. A border moon where the Karath administry processed, sorted, and redistributed the displaced of 4 systems. I had seen families separated by a form filed in the wrong triplicate. I had seen people remanded for debts they did not know they owed. I had seen the machinery of administration grind on the living with the indifference of weather. I had not seen a child with no record. I crouched down to her eye level. Her gaze didn't move from the door. I said, in the 3 trade languages I had, that I was a medic, that I wasn't going to touch her without permission, that I just wanted to know if she was hurt. She looked at me then, just looked. I pulled out my scanner, held it where she could see it, and waited. After a moment, she gave the smallest nod I have ever been asked to interpret as consent. She was not hurt. She was thin, the Vethara run slight anyway, and she was slight even for that, and she was tired in the particular way that has nothing to do with sleep. The scanner flagged mild dehydration, nothing structural. I logged it, and then I tried to pull her intake record. There was no intake record. I tried 3 more query strings. I cross-checked the Bay 11 assignment manifest. I pulled the shift log for the past 18 hours. Nothing. She did not exist in the administrative system, which meant, by the logic of the administrative system, she could not be here. She was very clearly here. I sat down on the floor next to her. It was the end of a long shift, and the floor was cold, and I did not particularly care. I opened my kit and found the water ration I had not drunk and held it out, not pushing it toward her, just putting it in the space between us where she could take it or not take it. She took it. She drank half, stopped, looked at me, looked at the bottle, looked at me again. I told her it was hers. She drank the rest. I had about 20 minutes before the compliance rotation came through Bay 11 on their overnight sweep. I spent 15 of them trying to reconstruct how she had gotten into the system without being in the system. What I found, buried in a flagged and dismissed anomaly report from 2 days prior, was a deletion request filed by an administrative data clerk named Sorvath Penn, a name that appeared on 3 other anomaly reports I had never thought to connect, all involving minors, all in the weeks before a labor bond auction in the outer Karath registry. I sat with that for a moment. Then I took out the one form in the administration's entire medical jurisdiction that I had never had cause to use in 6 years, and I read it again very carefully, and I began to fill it out. The form was called a Temporary Medical Dependency Declaration. It existed because, 40 years ago, a Vethara epidemic had swept through a processing station much like this one, and the administration, facing mass mortality among wards with no legal guardian of record, had needed a mechanism for a station medic to assume provisional care of an unaccompanied minor for the duration of a medical event. The form required a licensed medic's biometric signature, a documented medical basis, and here was the thing. Once filed, it created a jurisdictional hold that suspended all other administrative proceedings involving the named ward until a Karath Medical Tribunal reviewed the case. The Karath Medical Tribunal convened quarterly, in the outer administry. The medical basis I documented was accurate. Dehydration, documented stress indicators consistent with prolonged isolation, and what I recorded, carefully and truthfully, as an inability to establish baseline health without ongoing monitoring. Every word was true. None of it was the whole truth. I filed the form at 2:14 station time. The system accepted it. It generated a case number. It sent a notification to the medical tribunal's queue. The compliance officers came through at 2:20. There were two of them, Carath, tall, the particular flat-affect authority of people who have never been told no by a mechanism they understood. They scanned the bay, saw the child sitting next to me on the floor, and one of them moved toward her. I stood up. I told them she was a registered medical ward under a temporary dependency declaration, case number, filed at 214, and that any transfer of the ward pending tribunal review constituted an administrative interference with medical jurisdiction, which carried, I had looked this up, a personal liability penalty for the interfering officer. The one who had moved stopped. The other one pulled out a reader and started checking. I watched him find the form. I watched him find the case number. I watched him find the part about the tribunal. He looked at me. He said this was irregular. I said I agreed with him entirely. He said the ward had no intake record, which meant she was not a registered resident of the station, which meant my jurisdiction did not apply. I said the form did not require prior registration. I read him the text, and that the absence of an intake record was itself a matter under medical review, given the documented isolation stress indicators. There was a long pause. The compliance system, I knew, had no protocol for this. It had never needed one. No medic at Verk's Landing had ever filed a temporary dependency declaration in living memory, and the officers were running searches that were coming back empty because there was nothing to find. The one with the reader said they would need to consult with their supervisor. I told them I thought that was an excellent idea. I gave them the case number again in writing, and I asked them to note in their log that the ward had been in my medical custody and in good health at time of contact. They noted it. They left. The child looked up at me. I do not know what she understood of any of that. Her trade language, if she had one, was buried somewhere under the exhaustion and the silence. But she had watched every second of it, the officers, the reader, the pause, the leaving, and something in her face had shifted. Not relief exactly. Something more careful than relief. Something that looked like a person recalculating what the world might contain. What followed was not simple. Sorvath Pen was located by station security 4 days later, after I filed a separate report, carefully, specifically, with every anomaly log attached, with the one administrative oversight body that outranked the local compliance division. He had done this before. The records that came out of his arrest were not pleasant to read, and I will not describe them here. The tribunal was 8 weeks off. I prepared for it the same way I prepared for everything, methodically, without expectation of help, with the understanding that I might lose and that losing was still better than not having tried. I had the documentation. I had the case number. I had the truth, which is not always sufficient but is always worth having. In the meantime, she stayed in the medic's quarters. I learned her name was something close to Vale. She showed me, drawing characters on a fogged porthole with one careful finger, then looking at me until I tried to say it, and she corrected my pronunciation twice. She ate steadily. She slept without apparent distress. She watched me work with the focused patience of someone who has learned to read a situation before committing to it. And I recognized that in her because I had learned it the same way, in a different life, on a different kind of border. The tribunal found in my favor. The medical basis was upheld. Sorvath Pen's deletion scheme collapsed under its own documentation. The labor bond auction was suspended. 3 other children from his records were recovered by a Vethara kinship organization that I did not know existed until they contacted the tribunal, and I spent 2 weeks hoping Vale would be claimed by someone from her own people, and dreading it in equal measure. She was not. Her family was gone. The kinship organization offered placement. She sat in my office while I explained it to her as best I could, and she listened. And then she looked at me for a long time, and she drew one character on the dusty surface of my desk. I did not know what it meant. I looked it up later. In the Vethara written language, it is the symbol for a question that expects yes as the answer. I signed the permanent papers 3 months after that. There is nothing I did that was extraordinary. The form existed. The law had a gap in it. I knew where the gap was and I used it. Any medic could have done it. Most of them, I think, would have given the same night, the same child, the same floor, the same water ration sitting in the space between them. I know that is true. I have to believe it is true. She is 12 now. She corrects me on the Vethara counting, which runs differently, but 12 is close enough. She wants to be a lawyer. She says the administry's forms are badly written and she can do better. I told her she probably could. She said she definitely could. I did not argue.